if you've been a manga, manhwa, and anime fan as long as I have, you've gone through some different seasons of fandom. And I wanted to talk to you guys today about what is better between manga and manhwa. And I want to give this, obviously, this falls down to taste and preference and all these different things, but I really wanted to talk on the advantages of each. And I wanted to take like a moment to just talk about the medium in general because I feel like things are often very black and white for people of like, oh, I like this, I hate this, when there's a lot of shades of gray in here and there's nothing wrong with liking all of it. But I definitely want to talk about what some of the advantages are, some of the issues you might be facing as a manhwa fan, and how some of the solutions might be found in manga, and kind of where I think things are going from here. So starting off, I want to talk about what's manhwa first and foremost versus manga. Basically, the only difference between manga, manhwa, and manhwa is where the creators are from. If it's a Korean creator creating in Korea, it is a Korean manhwa. If it's a comic made in Japan, it is called manga. And if it's made in China, made by a Chinese creator, it is a manhwa with an HUA at the end. That is the fundamental only difference. You could absolutely have a black and white manga style like Sunken Rock or The Breaker New Waves in Korea, and it's still a manhwa. And you can do the same thing in China and have it be called a manhwa over there as well. So that's kind of the fundamental difference between these things. But we know there's more differences than that. The types of storylines we touch on are very different in the different mediums. And I want to start with one of the reasons why I've kind of gone the direction of manhwa more than anything else. One, you may have realized, I'm a little bit older than the average person you're going to see talking about this topic on YouTube, on TikTok, and stuff like that. I accept that. That's the reality. So because of that, I've gone through all of these different seasons of fandom. And one thing I love about Korean manhwa in particular is the average age of the characters. Most Korean manhwa have characters that seem or appear to be 17, 18, 19 years old. They're adults or nearing adulthood. They're dealing with issues that are more associated to those things, whereas manga tends to skew their characters a lot younger. They might ironically be dealing with the same issues, but you'll often see lolly-looking characters, youthful-looking characters, Shota-looking characters. It's just like things that make me, at the age I'm at now, rather uncomfortable. Not gonna lie. I am not throwing any shade at anyone that likes it. There is nothing wrong with that. You like what you like. That is up to you. That being said, for me, that's a huge difference because that means I can associate for myself a bit more to the characters. When I was 15, 16, 17, and I read manga or watched anime, I had a lot easier time to associate in the characters because honestly, they were not that different from my age. They seemed young. I was young. It just fit together. It just made a lot of sense at the time. So just as I've gotten older, I'm just like, well, I can't see myself in these characters anymore in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of like tropes that don't work for me anymore. I often talk about how I can't deal with harems. And Korean manhwa don't have quite as many harems. There are still some. There are a lot of harems in Chinese manhwa and a lot of harems in Japanese manga. And particularly harems with skewed younger characters that like live off of like stereotypes and like one character traits. I can't do it. I used to watch a ton of like harem ecchi manga anime when I was younger, and like it didn't creep me out. Now it makes me super uncomfortable, and I'm just like, nah, I don't want to read that or watch that. So that's kind of like what's behind that. And I love good characters. I love character with depth. I love characters that have nuance, that are not just tsunderes or something like that. They're like a complicated personality with upsides and downsides. That's humans, and I love that, particularly in romance stories. I love seeing characters that are like, they don't always act the same way. So in that, I found that in Korean manhwa, characters just feel more like human beings in most cases. I'm going to now say why they're not human beings in a lot of cases, and that is there's an over, like, this is one thing you're going to find with manhwa, and it's one thing that can create some fatigue after a while, and that is there's a lot of the same. The medium of manhwa is not as old as the medium of manga. Manga's been around for a long time. There are so many manga out there touching on everything from playing Go to mecha stories, to conquering the universe, Gurren Lagann in the case of anime. Like, there's some crazy stuff out there, and that variety means that there's something for everyone. In the case of Korean manhwa, there's a very deep trend-driven thing going on, which is something that affects manga as well. But since there's been so many waves of trend in manga, it's easy to go back 10, 15 years and catch something completely different. Because of the trends of everything game-related, gate-related, tower climbing-related, and action-related, everything kind of looks the same with a different coat of paint and a few different lines of dialogue. And while I love these stories, and actually most of the things I read are of that type, there is a certain amount of fatigue that comes into play of like, oh, it's another one of those. And as I'm doing these recommendation videos on my TikTok channel, sometimes I'm just like, is this the same one as the one I recommended last week? Because I feel like the story is the same. And I'm like, no, different story from a different creator, sometimes from the same studio, often from the same studio, ironically. And I wanted to talk about one of the problems also in those genres. So the Korean manhwa style has really put a lot of emphasis on the silent, stoic, badass main protagonist. Think Legend of the Northern Blade, Solo Leveling, Mercenary Enrollment. Just a character that looks cool, is extraordinarily attractive, doesn't talk a lot, is like smoldering and kind of a badass at all times. What I've grown a little frustrated with, and I talked about it in another video that I recorded this week about Mercenary Enrollment, is that I think it would be a lot more fun sometimes to see that part of the character break and for him to fall in love with a character, or to have like deep interactions with a parental figure or something like that, where like he's just showing more of himself than just that. I was talking about Mercenary Enrollment, how it would be really fun to see him like fall for a girl and then see his passion and his interest when she's in danger or something like that, and how that would look a little different than it does right now. And for me, that means less repetition, more interesting character moments, and character growth. Solo Leveling has great action, but Sung Jin-woo doesn't change from chapter like 30 all the way to the end. Once he becomes the stoic badass, they try and like shoe in some small interactions with other characters. You get one chapter of him crying because someone died, but you see no change in the character. You don't see like the birth of what romance does to someone. Or I find that manga is a lot better at this, ironically. Like, as much as I'm not a fan of Mushoku Tensei because I dislike the main character, I think as a story, from who he is at the beginning of the story to the end, he goes through so much evolution as a character that I'm just like, wow, that is good freaking writing and storytelling. And that's really good. Actually, the beginning after the end is actually a good example of something a little different out there, where a main character has some nuance and he's called out for his bullshit sometimes, and he's forced to face who he is a little bit. And from what I've heard about the light novel, that's only going to accelerate as we go forward, which makes me really excited for some manhwa starting to pop up with a bit more to them than just flashy art and very flat characters. That being said, manhwa is still only at the beginning, guys. Like, whenever someone's like, oh, give me a lot of finished manhwa that I can go read the entire thing, I'm like, guys, there aren't that many of them. A lot of them are still ongoing. They've been going on for years. And the medium really hasn't been around that long at a level that most people would be interested in. Like, I often talk about like Webtoon. Webtoon has done so much to make like manhwa a relevant thing in the West. But Webtoon and, like, for example, The Magician. Visually, it's a little tough for people to go to because this manhwa came out some years ago. It's finished. It's a great story with, I think, cool art. But most people look at it now like, well, it's not a video game story. It doesn't have the same flashy art I'm used to. Thus, I don't like it. And I'm like, that's personal taste, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, like, it means that you're going to be stuck reading the same type of thing all the time. Like, there's, like, two pathways right now when it comes to Korean manhwa, and that's, like, the gaming side or the romance side. And the romance side has its own series of tropes and things related to it. So what's better, manga or manhwa? From a story perspective, it's manga. From an art standpoint, I'll still say it's manga, ironically. The detail in a lot of manga is just far beyond where we're at for Korean manhwa. There are exceptions. There are beautiful panels. Reading Her Summon is a great example of that. The art is spectacular, and the mastery of color adds something extra to the story. And most of us that love manhwa now just can't go back to manga. There's something extra that you get out of reading something in color that just isn't the same when you're reading something in black and white. And while I still love like the dozen or so manga that I read every single week when they come out with new chapters, I definitely don't read as much manga as I used to. I'm probably following a few hundred manhwas right now, where I'm following like 12 manga. That used to be completely the opposite back in the day when I would read Noblesse, Tower of God, God of High School, and those were like the main manhwa I would read, and that was about it. Like, the times have changed. That being said, with Crunchyroll, with Netflix possibly adapting more Korean manhwa, I'm excited to be seeing how much money and studios and energy is going to go into creating manhwa out there, and that's only going to push more innovation and more new types of stories in there. So I'm not saying that the only two things that exist are romance and game-like things. However, there are so many of these stories now, and they're the one on the forefront of the storytelling. That it's kind of tough. It's kind of tough when you're like, hey, yeah, get into this. You'll love like reading, I don't know, Bastard, or some other dark series that deals with bullying and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of like cool stories out there, but there definitely is a lot of sameness right now in regards to what's out there. So guys, if you like these kind of discussion videos, I'd love for you to leave a comment down below on maybe some discussions you'd like me to have, and some things you'd like me to cover on this channel. I'm always open to it, and I'm always looking for new content to make for you guys, because I do love interacting with you guys just in general, and I would love this YouTube channel to grow in general. So with that, guys, have a great one.